I'm Nancy, otherwise known as CampaignSick, and today we're going to talk about informational interviews. What is an informational interview? An informational interview, sometimes called a networking interview, is a conversation that you're going to ask to have with someone else in our industry, either because you're looking for jobs, you're looking to switch career paths, or their job just sounds awesome and like something you might want to do someday. So the first type of question that's great to ask on an informational interview is, what skills and experiences will prepare me to do, and then you name the job that they did or are doing that you're interested in doing. This is a really good question because sometimes you know where you are and you know where you want to be in 5 years, but you don't quite know how you're going to get there. So for example, let's say that you were a field organizer last cycle. You know that I've been a coordinated campaign director and that's something that you want to do. This is a great way to find out what my career path was and general advice that I have without just being like, tell me what to do. Which, by the way, if you ever feel like saying to people in the industry, I want to do that all the time. So it's not your best approach, but know that that is a totally valid instinct and you're not alone. The second type of question that I personally love to ask is, what do you wish you had known 5 years ago? I'll alter this, like if I'm talking to someone who's 20 years beyond me in our industry, I'll say 20 years. But the idea is like, what have you learned? I really like this question just because it gets people to be a little bit introspective and open up to you, and I always find people's answers so fascinating. If you read my blog, you'll know that I ask people this a lot. Not even necessarily people whose careers I want to emulate, but it's a really good way to get some cool tidbits about people's professional lives and also start a real conversation where you're making a connection with someone. Okay, these next two questions are really good if the person that you're interviewing holds a job that you would like to hold at a similar organization, or if you want to work for their organization eventually. And those questions are, what does your typical day-to-day look like? And what do you wish you had known before taking this job? Now, let's say someone says, oh, I really wish I had known before I took this job how much fundraising it entails. And you think, oh, fundraising? I never wanted to do fundraising. Then that's good information to have. Maybe you know that you're not applying to the right job titles. And that's totally great. Informational interviews are great for learning what you don't want to do just as much as what you do want to do. And let's say when they tell you about their day-to-day, you notice that they spend a lot of their time on the phone with allies in the progressive space, building those relationships. And then a couple weeks later, you're lucky enough to get a job interview with their organization. Well, then you know that's something I really want to highlight, is my ability to maintain relationships. These questions also show that you're interested in the actual work of what this person does, and that's never a bad thing. The second to last thing I'm going to tell you to ask on every single informational interview is, who else should I be talking to? If you've ever been a finance or field staffer on a campaign, then you know this is how you grow your network and build relationships, right? You get people to introduce you to other people. This is also a helpful question because it sort of provides a natural end to your conversation and gives you something to follow up with this person about. So the last thing that you're going to ask at your informational interview is, can I follow up with you about X? Now, what is X? That depends on the conversation you had. Maybe it's introducing you to a friend of theirs that they mentioned. Maybe it's checking in to see if their company is hiring in the new year. Whatever it is, you want to have an action plan so that you can be maintaining that relationship and keeping yourself at the top of this person's mind without feeling like you're bothering them. And the last thing that you're going to ask at your informational interview is, can I follow up with you about blank? What is blank? Well, that depends on the conversation that you had. Maybe it's, can I follow up with you to introduce me to your friend that you just mentioned? Maybe it's, can I check in the new year to see if you're hiring? Whatever it is, you want a plan of action so that you can maintain the relationship and keep yourself fresh and at the top of this person's mind without feeling like you're bugging them. All right, so we've talked about what to ask during an informational interview, but what about what not to ask? I'd argue this piece is just as important because you want to make sure that you're respecting this person's time and leaving a favorable impression. The first thing that drives me crazy during an informational interview is when people ask me things like, what's your job title or where do you work? Those are things that you can Google. If you don't know who I am and what I do, then why did you want to talk to me in the first place? Another thing that can really rub people the wrong way on an informational interview is when first thing out of your mouth you ask, hey, can you help me get a job at X or an interview at Y? I thought you invited me here for my advice, not for my headhunting services. A lot of times when someone asks me for an informational interview, this is only the first or second time I've met them. So why would I be able or willing to get them a job just like that? Now, of course, on an informational interview, you're looking to build a relationship, hoping that I'll help you with your networking, and maybe I will, but by being so presumptuous up front, you're not really laying the right groundwork. The next genre of question or statement out to make during an informational interview is any time where you're basically saying, I'm not willing to take the steps that one usually takes to get to your position. So for example, you want to be a field director at a large national organization, but you're not willing to be a field organizer again. And I get this. For years and years, people told me I had to go manage a big marquee race to get to where I wanted to be in my career, and I really resisted that. But I'll tell you what, it turns out that they were right. Not only that, of course, there are multiple ways to get to multiple different career paths, but that person you're talking to has probably had to take those steps, and so you don't want to sound like you think you're too good to do the work that they've already done. The final thing I want to advise you to avoid asking is, what do you want to know about me? I've been asked this a couple times when people have asked me to do informational interviews, and it always strikes me as really odd. Like, you asked me here, you're the interviewer, I'm the interviewee. You know what the objective of this conversation is. Don't get me wrong, it's great, totally natural and expected for you to share information about yourself during the course of our conversation, but you shouldn't rely on the other person to drive the conversation or come up with topics. Okay, we know what to ask and what not to ask, and now here are some additional tips and tricks to help you nail an informational interview. Number 1, Google. Look at my LinkedIn. We talked about this before. Don't spend your time asking me things you could have looked up online, but do learn a little bit about me so that we can have an intelligent conversation and you can ask great questions. Number 2, be obsequious. Anyone who's ever worked on a campaign knows the importance of saying thank you. People do informational interviews because it makes them feel valuable and important, so make the person you're talking to feel valuable and important. Number 3, follow up. If you say you're gonna send your resume after the call or coffee, then do it. It also drives me crazy when I give someone a contact that helps them get a job, but I never hear back from them. Make sure that you acknowledge any help you've gotten along the way. It'll keep our relationship strong. Make sure to define your objective when you're asking for the informational interview. If you're looking at changing careers, trying to move to DC, you want to break into the reproductive justice space, let that person know in the initial email so that they can already be proactively thinking about advice and ways to help you. Recognize that even the best advice comes with a specific perspective. When I was starting out on campaigns, I had some people tell me, you have to get into finance, it's the only way to have career stability. And then I had other people tell me, don't let people push you into finance just because you're a woman who works on campaigns. Ultimately, I had to make my own decisions, but that's why it's important to get a variety of advice from a variety of different perspectives. All right, finally, I want to leave you with this. Don't be shy. I know it can feel awkward reaching out to ask people for advice, but it's something we've all done at every step in our career. I know I've shared some of my pet peeves here, but in general, I really love when people ask for my advice, and I'm happy to give it, as long as they do it in a thoughtful way. So it's something I continue to do in my career, everyone I know has done, and I think that willingness to share is part of what makes our community great. So don't be shy to use your friends and colleagues as resources. All right, guys, there it was, my first YouTube video for CampaignSick. It was a lot more work than I thought it was gonna be, and I haven't even started editing yet. So if you like this, please like and subscribe, tell me what else you'd like to see, and be kind.